A merchant reaches an English market town just after sunset with 2 servants, 3 pack horses, and several bundles of cloth that cannot be left in the rain. At the inn gate, the charges begin before anyone is ordered a drink. The horses need oats, hay, straw, water, and stable space. The cloth needs a dry room and someone to guard it. The men want supper, candles, warmth, and beds. By morning, the innkeeper may collect more money from the animals and cargo than from the travelers themselves. It sounds like an excellent business. One customer can pay 5 or 6 different fees in a single night, but every service creates another expense. Grain prices rise, ale spoils, linen disappears, servants need food, roofs leak, customers leave debts behind. The landlord still expects rent even when the road is empty. So could a medieval inn make its operator wealthy? Or was it simply a large, exhausting machine that turned revenue into costs? To answer that, we need to stop thinking of the medieval inn as an old-fashioned pub. In late medieval England, a small alehouse might be little more than a household selling drink from its front room. A wine tavern could specialize in imported wine and urban customers. A substantial roadside inn was a much more complicated operation. It combined the functions of a hotel, restaurant, stable, warehouse, marketplace, and credit office. The public hall and the ale cups were only the visible parts. The real business extended through the entire property. A large inn might have a gateway wide enough for carts, an enclosed courtyard, stable ranges, storage rooms, kitchens, private parlors, guest chambers, hay barns, ovens, cellars, and sleeping space for servants. Some surviving buildings and records suggest that the largest examples could accommodate dozens of people at once. This scale mattered because medieval travel created problems at every stage. Roads were slow, journeys were tiring. Darkness made movement dangerous. Horses could not be parked and ignored. Valuable goods needed protection. A traveler arriving late in the day had fewer choices than a modern hotel guest. Walking to another inn might mean crossing an unfamiliar town in darkness while carrying money or merchandise. That gave a well-positioned inn an advantage. It did not merely sell comfort, it sold solutions to the difficulties created by distance. Location therefore determined much of the business before the operator served a single meal. An inn beside a major road, market square, bridge, or town gate could attract merchants, officials, messengers, pilgrims, livestock dealers, craftsmen, lawyers, and servants. Market days might fill the yard. Court sessions could bring legal business. Religious festivals and fairs could produce sudden waves of travelers. The same building on a minor road might struggle to cover its rent. Medieval customers did not arrive evenly throughout the year, and they did not all spend the same amount. A wealthy merchant might rent a private chamber and pay for several horses. A poor traveler might share a bed, eat little, and sleep beside other guests. A local man might buy drink but never stay overnight. The innkeeper needed all of them because each group supported a different part of the property. The first major barrier was the building itself. A large timber inn was expensive to construct. One useful documented example is the Angel Inn at Andover, developed by Winchester College during the 15th century. Records indicate that the complex cost roughly £400 to build. That number sounds modest only because the symbol is familiar. A medieval pound contained 240 pennies, making £400 equal to 96,000 pennies. A skilled carpenter earning around 5 pennies a day would need more than 19,000 working days to receive that amount in cash wages. At roughly 260 working days per year, the construction costs represented more than 7 decades of one carpenter's labor. Very few ordinary people could finance a building of that scale. This helps explain why major inns were often tied to wealthy landlords, religious institutions, colleges, nobles, or established urban property owners. The person running the business did not necessarily own the land and walls. He might lease them. That removed the enormous construction bill, but it replaced it with a fixed annual obligation. At the Angel, early rent was around £8 per year. That was 1,920 pennies, equal to hundreds of skilled working days. The operator could avoid paying £400 up front, but the landlord now had a claim on the business every year. Rain could wash out the road, a harvest could fail, a fair could disappoint, guests could disappear. The rent did not disappear with them. Leasing lowered the barrier to entry, but only partly. An empty inn was not ready to trade. The tenant still needed furniture, stock, equipment, animals, household goods, and working cash. Beds required wooden frames, mattresses, blankets, sheets, and replacements. The hall needed benches, tables, cups, jugs, plates, knives, and serving vessels. The kitchen required pots, pans, ovens, hooks, storage containers, and fuel. The stable needed racks, buckets, tools, straw, hay, oats, and space for tack. The cellar or storage rooms needed barrels and shelves. Candles had to be purchased before night trading could begin. Firewood had to be stacked before winter. Food and drink had to be available before the first profitable customer arrived. That opening stock tied money up in goods that might spoil, leak, break, or vanish. The innkeeper also needed cash reserves. Medieval business depended heavily on timing. A supplier might demand payment immediately. A regular customer might promise to settle after market day. A merchant could leave town still owing money. The accounts might show that the inn had earned income, but earnings written in a book could not purchase tomorrow's bread. The operator therefore needed enough cash to survive the gap between selling a service and collecting payment for it. This was one of the hidden entry barriers. A person could possess the skill to run an inn and still fail because he lacked the money to keep stock moving. Labor created the next challenge. The popular image of an innkeeper standing alone behind a counter is misleading. A large inn required an entire household. Someone had to brew or purchase drink, cook meals, clean rooms, change bedding, carry water, manage stores, feed animals, watch the gate, repair equipment, collect debts, and deal with late arrivals. The operator's spouse might supervise food, drink, servants, purchasing, and accounts. Children and relatives could fetch fuel, wash vessels, carry dishes, or help during market days. This family labor reduced the number of cash wages paid to outsiders, but it was not free. The household still consumed food, clothing, and lodging. More importantly, a profitable inn might look more successful on paper because much of the work performed by the family never appeared as a wage expense. If the operator, spouse, and children worked from before sunrise until after midnight, part of the apparent profit was simply payment for their labor. Hired workers were still necessary in a large establishment. A male laborer might earn around 3 or 4 pennies a day depending on the period and location. Women often received lower cash wages, although servants might also receive food, lodging, or clothing. A stable worker needed enough skill to handle valuable horses. A careless servant could waste oats, damage tack, allow an animal to escape, or injure a horse worth far more than his annual wages. A guest might forgive poor soup. He was less likely to forgive a lame horse. Brewing required its own experience and labor. Ale had to be produced, moved, stored, and served. In earlier medieval communities, women played a major role in brewing, but larger commercial production increasingly favored operators with more capital and equipment. Whether the drink was brewed on-site or purchased, the innkeeper faced the same basic problem. It was perishable inventory. Traditional unhopped ale did not keep well. Hopped beer became more common in England during the later 15th century and lasted longer, but it still required careful storage and reliable supply. Buying too little meant running out on a busy night. Buying too much meant watching money turn sour in a barrel. Wine added another layer of uncertainty. Imported wine depended on shipping, war, customs duties, merchant networks, and changing quality. A high selling price did not guarantee a high margin if the purchase price had already risen before the barrel reached town. Grain affected almost every part of the operation. It became bread for guests, malt for drink, oats for horses, and feed for livestock. When the harvest was poor, several costs could rise together. Bread became more expensive, ale became more expensive, fodder became more expensive, meat could follow. At the same time, ordinary customers had less money to spend because they were paying more for food at home. The innkeeper was squeezed from both directions. Costs rose while demand weakened. Fuel was another constant expense. The kitchen fire, ovens, brewing equipment, hot water, hall, and guest rooms consumed wood. Candles extended business into the night, but increased both expense and danger. The property itself was built largely from timber. It contained open flames, dry straw, hay, barrels, crowded rooms, and tired strangers. Fire was not a minor inconvenience. It could destroy the building, the stock, the guests' goods, and the surrounding town. Modern insurance did not exist to restore the business after a disaster. A profitable operation could vanish in a single night. With so many costs, the obvious question is why anyone wanted to lease a large inn. The answer was that the revenue came from far more than ale. Drink attracted attention because it was visible and frequent, but it faced competition from local alehouses and taverns. It also required grain, labor, vessels, and regulation. Authorities could inspect measures, quality, and prices. Fines and court appearances were part of commercial life. The stronger business model appeared when the innkeeper treated each visitor as several customers at once. A traveler bought food. He might buy bread, meat, fish, cheese, pottage, candles, or fuel. If he stayed overnight, he paid for sleeping space. Beds could be used repeatedly, and multiple travelers might share a chamber or even a bed. Once the room was furnished, an additional guest could produce revenue without requiring another building. But lodging was not always the most valuable part of the visit. The stable could generate a larger bill than the bedroom. A surviving 14th century travel account for 7 mounted travelers shows how important the animals were. The group paid only a small amount for beds, while the cost of horse fodder was several times higher. The exact prices changed across time and region, but the economic lesson is clear. A horse required hay, oats, straw, water, shelter, and labor. It could not decide to skip dinner because the inn was expensive. Travelers might share a room to save money, but their horses still had to be fed individually. From the operator's perspective, the stable was another dining hall, and its customers consumed more than the men sleeping upstairs. Fodder also offered a useful margin. The innkeeper could buy hay or oats in larger quantities, store them in a barn, and sell smaller portions to travelers who had little bargaining power after dark. This made the yard one of the most important parts of the property. A guest who purchased almost no ale could still be highly profitable if he arrived with several animals. Cargo created another source of income. Merchants needed dry storage, lockable rooms, cellar space, and guarded yards. Cloth could be ruined by rain. Pack animals had to be unloaded. Barrels, tools, and merchandise could not always remain outside. The inn already had walls, gates, rooms, and servants, so security became a service that could be sold. The operator might charge directly for storage, or the presence of valuable goods might encourage merchants to stay longer and spend more. Once merchants gathered in the same place, the inn became a trading center. Buyers and sellers could inspect goods, discuss prices, exchange information, and complete deals over food and drink. A merchant arriving with surplus cloth might meet a local buyer. A farmer delivering oats might hear that another town faced a shortage. A livestock dealer could find customers among travelers. The innkeeper stood at the center of these conversations. He knew who was buying, who was selling, who was short of cash, and which goods were moving. That information had value. Successful innkeepers could use it to trade on their own account. They might buy cloth, livestock, grain, or other goods. They could lease land, keep sheep, or supply travelers with horse bread and oats. In this way, the inn produced opportunities that never appeared on a simple room and board price list. Credit deepened the relationship. Regular merchants might run accounts and settle later. Offering credit could attract loyal customers and increase spending, especially when a buyer expected money after completing a market transaction. The innkeeper had an advantage over an unknown lender because he knew the customer's face, trade, goods, habits, and reputation. He could judge risk using local information. But credit also created one of the most dangerous weaknesses in the business. A sale was not the same as cash. During prosperous periods, customer accounts made the inn look busy and profitable. During a downturn, those accounts could become bad debts. A merchant unable to sell his goods might delay payment. A livestock dealer who lost animals might disappear. Meanwhile, suppliers bringing grain, wine, or fodder could demand cash. The innkeeper might be owed money by customers while owing money to everyone who kept the property running. That gap could destroy a business even when the accounts showed substantial revenue. Regulation limited the operator's freedom to solve the problem by raising prices. Medieval authorities were concerned with the price, measure, and quality of bread and drink. Rules also addressed the charges demanded for travelers for provisions and horse feed. This mattered because officials understood that travelers, especially those with animals, could be exploited. A person arriving after dark had limited choices. The law tried, at least in principle, to prevent innkeepers from using that dependence without restraint. Legal responsibility created further risk. Innkeepers provided custody as well as shelter. If a guest's goods disappeared under the inn's roof, the operator could be expected to answer for the loss. Every profitable service carried a matching liability. Beds created cleaning costs and theft. Stables created risks involving animals. Storage created responsibility for merchandise. Credit created bad debt. Drink created inspections and fines. Private meeting rooms created reputational risk. The operator was not simply selling space, he was promising that people, animals, and goods would be reasonably safe. Reputation therefore functioned like an asset. Merchants returned to the inn where accounts were remembered, horses were handled properly, and cargo remained secure. A badly managed property could retain its walls, beds, and barrels while losing the customers who mattered most. The annual numbers show how quickly the economics could change. No complete operating statement survives for every medieval inn, so any model must be presented as a reconstruction rather than a precise universal account. Consider a large English roadside inn paying around £8 in annual rent. In a strong year, it might average roughly 15 travelers per day across 300 active trading days, supported by local food, drink, meetings, storage, and commercial activity. A reconstructed revenue figure could approach £80 or £90. That was a remarkable amount of money flowing through one property. But revenue was only the first line. Provisions and fodder could consume more than £35. Rent removed £8 before the operator paid himself. Hired labor might take another £10 or more. Fuel, repairs, linen, broken equipment, spoiled stock, fines, theft, and bad debts could remove another substantial share. Under favorable assumptions, perhaps £15 to £20 might remain as a cash surplus. That would be an excellent result. It could equal several years of an ordinary laborer's cash income. It would allow the innkeeper to purchase stock in bulk, negotiate better prices, survive late-paying customers, repair the roof before it became a disaster, or invest in livestock and land. Cash created resilience, and resilience created better opportunities. A well-capitalized operator could buy grain when prices were favorable, while a struggling competitor had to purchase small quantities at the worst possible time. This difference could widen year after year. Yet the strong year surplus was not equivalent to a modern corporate profit. It included compensation for the unpaid work of the operator's household. It did not fully account for exceptional disasters, financing costs, or years of poor trading. The same inn in an ordinary year might see traffic fall to 10 travelers per day. Revenue could drop toward £55 or £60. Some costs would fall, but not at the same speed. Guests consumed less food and fodder, yet rent remained fixed. The household still ate, essential servants still worked, fuel was still needed, the building still required maintenance. Under those conditions, the remaining surplus might be only a few pounds. That was useful money, but not a comfortable margin. One major repair, a run of unpaid accounts, or a sudden rise in grain prices could consume it. Now reduce traffic to 5 travelers per day. Perhaps the road becomes unsafe, war disrupts movement, disease discourages travel. A competing route grows more popular. A local fare declines. Revenue might fall toward £25 or £30, while costs refuse to fall far enough. Rent still claims £8. The building cannot be heated, repaired, and guarded for nothing. Stock may spoil faster because it sells slowly. Customers facing hardship may delay payment. The business can lose more than £10 in cash. One weak year could erase much of the gain from a strong year. 2 or 3 could leave the operator selling household goods, reducing stock, dismissing servants, or falling behind on rent. Surviving rent records reveal this quieter form of failure. Tenants sometimes accumulated arrears. Landlords occasionally reduced or remitted rent because the amount written in the lease could not be collected in practice. There was no need for a dramatic bankruptcy scene. The evidence might be only a missing payment in an account book. The property promised £10. The landlord received less. The difference represented empty rooms, expensive grain, bad debts, illness, weak traffic, or poor management. The basic vulnerability was simple. Income moved with the road, while much of the cost base remained fixed. An innkeeper could not return half the roof when half the customers disappeared. This explains why the most successful operators did not leave all their wealth inside the inn. They used the property as a platform to acquire other assets. A documented late medieval innkeeper such as Richard Kingsmill did more than provide beds and drink. He sold oats and horse bread, traded in cloth, kept a large flock of sheep, leased a manor, held local office, and eventually entered national politics. His rise did not come from pouring ale more efficiently than everyone else. The inn gave him access to travelers, information, credit relationships, goods, and opportunities. He converted those advantages into livestock, land, trade, and influence. That was the real path to wealth. The inn could generate cash, but its greater value was the network passing through the gate. A capable operator learned who could be trusted, where shortages existed, which merchants needed buyers, and when land or goods became available. He then moved profits into assets that did not depend entirely on the next night's occupancy. So, could operating a medieval inn make someone rich? Yes, but only under demanding conditions. The operator needed a busy location, a survivable lease, enough capital to hold stock, disciplined accounts, reliable servants, secure storage, careful lending, and a reputation strong enough to attract repeat customers. He also needed the judgment to recognize that ale was not the entire business. The profitable inn sold meals, beds, fodder, security, storage, information, meeting space, and credit. Its best customers might be horses, merchants, and bundles of cargo rather than men drinking in the hall. But the same complexity that created revenue also multiplied risk. Every room required maintenance. Every animal created responsibility. Every account could become a debt. Every barrel could spoil. Every candle could start a fire. Every quiet week made the rent heavier. The landlord owned the durable asset and collected a slow return. The tenant controlled the daily income but carried most of the volatility. A cautious operator could earn a living. A skilled and well-capitalized one could use the inn to enter trade, acquire land, and gain political influence. An underfunded tenant facing weak traffic could work harder than anyone in town and still end the year owing money. The medieval inn was profitable not because travelers loved ale, but because travel created expensive problems. Nightfall created demand for beds and light. Horses created demand for fodder and labor. Merchandise created demand for storage and security. Distance created demand for food, information, and credit. The innkeeper earned money by solving all of those problems in one enclosed yard. The greatest fortunes came when he understood that the travelers passing through his property were not merely guests. They were a moving market, and the inn was the toll gate through which their needs, goods, risks, and money had to pass.